Welcome to this session. I've done some careful thinking about health. If you've been familiar with my previous sessions, you know that I've done a lot of work on this and have been very successful. The first is so obvious, and yet it's hard to focus on. Suppose I asked you, how healthy are you? Can you give me a good, straightforward, simple answer? I can speak for myself. In the past, that question couldn't get a good answer. All I could do was find things to complain about. Well, I'm a little worried about my vision, or my stomach's been upset, or I'm getting a lot of gas, or I'm having pain in one of my shoulders, or something like that. In fact, it wasn't answering the question directly at all. And that's really odd when you think about it. I mean, after all, isn't our health important? Shouldn't it be possible to give a good answer to such a question? I've been thinking about why, and actually it's a very straightforward, very reasonable answer. If you are as old as I am, and many of you are, you can look back at earlier years, and I personally see a huge difference, and a very beneficial one, in the world I'm living in over the time of my lifetime. It's just a whole lot of things work better. These are things. They are cars, they are ships, they are airplanes, they are printing presses, they are computers, which of course didn't exist when I was born. They are industrial machines. All of these things are extremely reliable, they're very helpful, they are easy to use in so many ways that wasn't true earlier. Yes, I know we hear about all the disasters and so on, but, well, I don't live in Afghanistan. I don't live in Iraq, so perhaps that's a good thing for me. And I've learned that most of the things that the newspapers spend all of their time talking about have nothing at all to do with me, so I've learned not to read them. More to the point, all of these things that have been so beneficial to us are things. And America, I live in America, has made an enormous amount of money from being very creative about improving these things, material objects. We've benefited in a great deal from having learned to focus on them. Here's my problem. I tend to think of myself as a material object. Now, if I look at an ordinary material object, like, oh, say, that camera, would it make any sense for me to ask that camera if it's healthy? It's laughable, isn't it? It's ridiculous. Camera doesn't have a health. What can you ask about a camera? You can say, well, is it working right? If it's not, well, you replace it, or you fix it, or you bring it to a specialist, which turns out to be exactly the modality used when you go to the doctor. In other words, traditional Western medicine treats you as a thing. And it's not too surprising when you consider that most of us by now have become materialists in a philosophical sense. We think that deep down inside, at the lowest possible level, we are all things. And it's an odd thought now, because after 30 years of teaching physics, I know an electron certainly isn't a thing in that sense. A photon, a light particle, certainly isn't. It's half wave and half particle, and the corrections and the combinations are very interesting. I've been reading a little bit about the sun, and the studies of the surface of the sun make the sun appear honestly alive. It is not a thing. The earth we live on. Could you imagine considering this beautiful, amazing planet as a thing? So, aside from being an oversimplification, it might just be wrong. Why do I care? Because I'm interested in my health. And I know that if I think of myself in this materialist way as a thing, it's virtually impossible for me to think about it. Do you think about the health of a brick? And yet I think about my health. I've been very creative in working with it. I've invented some stuff. I'm getting very good at asking these questions. And it comes basically from realizing that the way I think about myself is the key to my ability to maintain my health. It's an important point, and it's turning out to be very useful to me. I'd recommend you consider it. The first thing to be considered is, well, in physics, none of the objects that I am studying at the lowest level can even remotely be considered things. Even more to the point, quantum mechanics has this very peculiar phenomenon in which when you observe something, it seems to change it. Physicists have a terrible time with this, and yet they teach it. We speak of a wave function that objects have probabilities, and you never know exactly what it's doing until you look at it. There it is. Now, things are supposed to be totally independent of observation. How can something be totally independent of observation if the only time it stays in place is when you look at it? We do have some influence, and yet it's not the influence of one particular person. It's the influence of, well, we like to say it's consciousness, some kind of universal characteristic of being observed. We're going way past the idea of a simple thing now when we deal with that. And I suspect that our health has some of those same characteristics and the same complexities. So, do you want your health to just be out of control? Don't ask questions. But as soon as you really look at it, this quantum mechanical grayness fixes into something that you can focus on. Is that worth thinking about? I hope so. I'll talk to you again.